Hi, I'm Susannah Rose Stokes, and I am a former Marine officer and the co-founder of Metamorphosis Ventures and House of Embodied Metamorphosis, where we help facilitate human transformation through psychedelics and altered states of consciousness. I got into this work because I started to see the patterns of post-trauma in my own system and even in my family system. It was such a powerful time in my life when I joined the military to begin to witness the reality of war. I went to the Naval Academy thinking that I was going to save the world and go into politics, like a lot of us do. And right out of the Naval Academy, I was assigned to a unit that took me to Afghanistan for my first deployment. Once I got there, that's when I realized how challenging the nature of war is and how much it doesn't work. And it began to cause me to question everything I knew about religion, about my belief system, about God, and even the existence of God. I was like, how in the world could some bigger thing, like the one that I learned growing up in the Methodist church and the Baptist church, how could that being allow this to happen, allow us to treat each other this way? And when I went back for my second deployment, I went deeper into that and began the first process of my disillusionment. And as I went through that process of disillusionment, everything I knew about who I was, about my reality, about the goals I had in life started to dissolve. And I found myself in this place of post-trauma, of hyper anxiety, of just living in fear, of hypervigilance, of literally waking up in the middle of the night with nightmares, and also loud noises causing me to jump and be afraid. And simultaneously, I was watching my younger sister, who I love dearly, battle this challenge with addiction and borderline personality disorder that was causing her to have suicidal ideations and ultimately a couple years of very serious suicidal attempts. She even managed to stop her heart a couple of times and they had to revive her. And as I'm watching all of these things happen, I was like, how do we heal these challenges? These are sort of the invisible challenges that so many of us face, whether it be addiction, post-trauma, and these are in all of our families, no matter what socioeconomic level you're in. Being in the military exposed me to every range, background, diverse human you could possibly imagine. And I noticed that we all had these similar existential crises with killing people and with the nature of conflict and war around the world. And we didn't have the tools. No one of us had the proper tools. And of course, the Veterans Affairs system and the military system would just give you pills, pills on pills on pills on pills to heal what you needed to heal. And ultimately, the knowing that if I went into one of those places and got diagnosed with post-trauma and got diagnosed with sexual trauma from the military, that I would just be given some kind of medication that would numb me, left me feeling completely hopeless. And so I got out of the military after 2 deployments to Afghanistan. That was enough for me. And I came out with military sexual trauma. I came out with post-trauma and emotional distress, hypervigilance, constant state of fight or flight. My partner, who I'd met in Afghanistan, also had that same experience. And I knew there had to be something different. So what I did was what any transitioning military member does, is just focus on the next mission. And that process of jumping into my next mission led me to the corporate world. It led me to the tech industry, which led me to San Francisco and to a whole community of people, burners, as they say, people who go to festivals and Burning Man, who recreationally work with plant medicine. And I was working for some of the top executives, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook. And I had this fancy job that I got right out of the military in a very surreal way, thinking that I was on top of the world. And I began to work with these medicines. And the first time I engaged with LSD, which I was terrified of, by the way, there's so much stigma around these medicines, especially LSD. So I fell into that same trap of thinking LSD is going to bond to your DNA and be found in your body 20 years after you were dead, or all of these fears around how it was going to change me permanently. What I didn't know was that I actually wanted to be changed by LSD. It was exactly the kind of change I was looking for. But I remember my first journey, my first trip with LSD, and I was out in this gorgeous valley in California, and I looked across the river and I saw a mountainside full of trees, and I watched them breathe. I watched the entire earth come alive. And I watched myself become a part of that earth and the interconnectedness of all things, which later in my research I found was one of the most common experiences of why psychedelics create such change, because we get to experience in our body the interconnectedness with everything that is. So I was working in the tech industry, thinking everything was great. Actually, my nervous system was on high alert. And meanwhile, my sister was battling anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder. She had been prescribed dozens, literally dozens of medications from psychiatrists. And then she began to become suicidal. And I was frantic because I thought, oh my God, like, what if she doesn't make it? And I knew there was something deeper that actually resonated with things I was feeling too, that I had suppressed, that I had not looked at. I had not looked at my post-trauma. I had not looked at my military sexual trauma. And once I started to explore with plant medicine, it opened up the door, because it opened my mind to the possibility that there is something different, that there's a different way to heal. And I knew that the military, if I went to them, if I went to any healthcare system, all they were going to do was give me medication to numb me, to stop the feelings. That's not what I wanted. I just wanted to continue to dissolve all of the things that were harming me and really change. So while I was looking for my own healing, I was looking for my sister's. And on that very first trip with LSD, it said to me, the medicine came to me and said, okay, I know you're having a great time. I know you're having a great time. And yes, this kind of experience can be playful, but there's so much more here, Susanna. There is so much more to this medicine, and you work with this medicine. You work with plant medicine. There is healing power in this medicine. And so I went in search of that healing power, because I was witnessing people aching all around me, whether in the corporate world, whether in the military. I had a front row seat to all kinds of trauma that was just being swept under the rug, to addiction, everything you can imagine. And that's when I began to explore with different plant medicines. So I sat with LSD, MDMA, psilocybin, and I finally did a ceremonial experience with Bufo, 5-MeO-DMT, which, if you haven't sat with Bufo, woo! It felt for me like a sledgehammer to my forehead. It was an intense experience. And it brought me out of my body, and I watched my body die in a vision. And I had not necessarily an ego death, but a physical death of sorts, at least what I thought was a physical death. And I watched my body be taken away in an ambulance, and I thought to myself, what are my parents going to think that I died at 30 on the floor of my condo in San Francisco? And then I woke up, and I had a process of disillusionment that caused me to look at everything around me and go, what are we doing here? What am I doing here? Am I living my purpose at all? And that began to activate me in a new way. And actually, 2 weeks after that, I was recreationally working with LSD. No one had told me maybe you shouldn't work with LSD after Bufo. So I'm sitting on the side of a mountain in California, meditating, because that's what the medicine told me to do. And I felt a vortex of energy, like a tornado, come down into my body, swirling everything around, and I was completely no longer myself. This was the ego death. And it showed me the perfection of who I am based on both of my bloodlines. It showed me every person that had come together to make me, and why I am exactly who I should be, and why it's so important that I step into my purpose in a completely new way. And it said, Susanna, you do healing work. So maybe stop doing all these other things. Stop working in the corporate world. You are a healer, which means you just reflect back to people how they can heal themselves. And I got this huge download and this spiritual awakening. And that led me to sit in a ceremonial container with psilocybin, and then with Wachuma, San Pedro, and then with ayahuasca. And ultimately to meet the two women who I would found Metamorphosis with, Jenna and Ashley. And we held our first retreat in 2021 with just 9 people, thinking it would just be one event, just one event. And we had 9 people come together. And what we saw during that journey with psilocybin was that they united. And the collective energy of the community and the power of the integration that we offered them on both sides, because all 3 of us had experienced containers where facilitators didn't have the time or the space or the energy to help with integration. So we decided to do it differently, and we created the Metamorphosis method. And Metamorphosis Ventures, from that little 9-person retreat, grew into a full-blown organization with new facilitators being attuned, with whole coaching and community programs, because we believe that coaching, community, and ceremony all need to come together into one place. And that's where House of Embodied Metamorphosis comes in, because we live in a country where freedom of religion has allowed us to work with these kinds of medicines safely and legally as our sacrament in a spiritual, ceremonial way. So we can blend the clinical and the spiritual, the scientific and the spiritual, if you will, into one place, and give people a chance to really transform from the inside out, which is what ultimately all of my master's work was on, was understanding how powerful these medicines are to heal on fundamental layers of our being. And I am so grateful to this medicine because then, just a couple of years after I began practicing and people started to come to me, I worked with my sister 2 years in a row and served her ceremonies. And after the second ceremony, when she was in the depths of darkness and she had managed to stop her heart several times through suicide attempts, afterward, she looked at me and she said, "I choose life." And she stopped attempting suicide completely. And that warmed my heart because I could not have imagined living this life without her. And my mother has been healed and my family system has been healed. And the same thing for my whole team and my co-founders, all of our families. And what we saw was a rippling out into the community of healing, of activation, of spiritual connection, of a reclaiming of their individual connection with source or God or universe, whatever they believed. And that's why we do what we do, because we believe in decentralized spirituality. We believe in the power of the individual to heal themselves, and that your healing is my healing, is our healing.